Good day, ma'am. So for today, we will talk about welfare economics. So first, I will introduce myself and my members. I am Kim Malong, and together with Krisha May Brudo and Ate Rovelu Antazo, we will start ang aming report. So first, I will tackle what welfare economics was all about. Welfare economics is a field of economics that applies microeconomic techniques to evaluate the overall well-being of a society. Inaaral dito kung papaano nakakaapekto yung allocation ng resources sa ating economic well-being, as well as it deals with the topic of justice, equity, freedom, and other pertinent topics geared toward economic growth. Moreover, ito yung allocation of goods and resources for promoting social welfare. It seeks to guide the public policy such that the distribution is economically and socially beneficial for all sections of the society. Example of this includes household savings, reducing income inequality, access to healthcare services, part of normative economics, justice and freedom, affordable housing, access to education, energy efficiency, employment, and reducing inequality. While sa social welfare naman, it could be defined as the many programs that are designed to help people in need of goods and services that they are unable to provide for themselves, like sa mga local, state, and federal government programs, which is yung mga available. So, some kinds of social welfare include cash assistance for the elderly and disabled, free or reduced cost school lunches, help with a home loan, and provision of physical goods like groceries, medical devices, and health insurance. So let's move on sa two approaches of welfare economics. So first, let's define what neoclassical economic means. Neoclassical economic is a broad theory that focuses on supply and demand as the driving forces behind the production, pricing, and consumption of goods and services. It emerged in around 1900 to compete with the earlier theories of classical economics, where neoclassical was developed by Edgeworth Sidgwick, Marshall, and Pigou, and it assumes that utility is cardinal, which means that the more of an item that you use or consume, the less satisfaction you get from each additional unit consumed or used. Second naman is diminishing marginal utility, which means that the level of satisfaction a consumer acquires after consuming any goods and services can be measurable and expressed in quantitative numbers. And lastly, all individuals have interpersonally comparable utility functions. So we have key takeaways, and these are: classical economists assume that the most important factor in a product's price is its cost of production. Neoclassical economists argue that the consumer's perception of a product's value is the driving factor in its price. Third, the difference between actual production cost and retail price is the economic surplus. Fourth, neoclassical economic theory can impact how businesses operate, government and financial institutions operate, as well as how governments regulate markets. And lastly, critics argue that theory doesn't account for other factors that impact consumer decisions, such as limited information, resource inequality, or emotional thinking. Alright, so, in welfare economics naman, we define it as it recognizes the difference between the efficiency aspects of the discipline and the distribution aspect and treats them differently. So, yung una dun is It replaces cardinal utility with ordinal utility, wherein mas pinili nila na i-define yung satisfaction of user goods through ranking and order of preference, pero hindi siya na-evaluate numerically. Second naman, Kaldor-Hicks efficiency or Cytowski criterion. Nakapaloob din dito yung Kaldor-Hicks efficiency, wherein it was all about an alteration in the allocation of resources, and it produces more benefits than costs. Like, for example, a voluntary exchange that creates pollution would be a Kaldor-Hicks improvement if the buyers and sellers are still willing to carry out the transaction even if they have to fully compensate the victims of the pollution. While in Cytowski criterion naman, it says that a change should be made if, after it has occurred, the losers could not afford to compensate the gainers for changing back. And this will be elaborated by the next reporter mamaya. So, lastly, question of income distribution are covered by Bergson and Samuelson's social welfare function. So, ano nga ba yun? It is a function that ranks social state, alternative complete description of the society as less desirable, more desirable, or indifferent for every possible pair of social states. It considers welfare for a given set of individual preferences or welfare rankings. Okay, next report.
So next is the conditions for efficiency and inefficiency. So in the efficiency side, a situation is considered to be a distributive efficiency in social welfare when it is Pareto efficient, which is what many economists use as their efficiency goal, where the situation is satisfactory if no individual can be made better off without making someone worse off. Hindi na ako masyadong magtatagal sa Pareto efficiency because the next reporter will talk about it. So let's move on to the four certain criteria to be met for it to be called ideal states of affairs sa efficiency side. First criteria is just like Pareto efficiency, that is when no consumer can be made better off without making others worse off. Second criteria is when it is impossible to increase the production of any good without reducing the production of other goods. Third criteria is when marginal physical product of a factor must be the same for all firms producing a good. And the last criteria is production must match consumer wants. So may dalawang compensation test na na-develop para makipakita kung yung economy pa is moving forwards towards Pareto efficiency. So the first test is the Kaldor criterion, or the gainer's point of view, which means that an activity will contribute to Pareto optimality if the maximum amount that the gainers are prepared to pay is greater than the minimum amount that the losers are prepared to accept. While the Hicks criterion, or the loser's point of view, is the opposite of the Kaldor's, where an activity will contribute to Pareto optimality if the losers maximum amount that they are prepared to offer to the gainers is less than the minimum amount that the gainers are prepared to accept as a sort of bribe to forego the change. So if both the conditions of the test are satisfied, then both the gainer side and the loser side will agree that the activity will move the economy to Pareto optimality. So let's go to the inefficiency side. So as for the inefficiency, most economists agree that the following may lead to inefficiency. The first is imperfect market structures. So an example that comes to mind is monopoly. And when we talk about monopoly, it is the first thing that comes to mind is electricity, which is Tarelco. So they are the only ones that could provide electricity, and walang gusto makipag-compete sa kanila, diba? Kasi nga, yung service na yun, kapag gusto mo mag-start nun, is yung starting capital niya is so high na hindi kayang, parang, hindi kayang mag-start ng ibang tao ng business na yun kasi sobrang taas nga yung cost. Next is factor allocation and efficiency, where the allocation of resources is not handled correctly, and this does not lead to maximum overall satisfaction for the economy, just like market failures. Third is price discrimination and price skimming. These two are pricing strategies na ginagamit daw ng mga businesses para ma-maximize nila yung profit na nakukuha nila. Next is asymmetric information, when one person holds more information than the other. Next is the long-run declining average cost in a natural monopoly, where competition is limited kasi yung firm na yun is nilower nila yung cost per unit, kaya syempre mas mabibenta at wala nang opportunity yung mga potential competitors nila. Lastly, certain types of taxes and tariffs. An example of this is when the government raises taxes on certain goods and services. Taxes can result in a higher cost of production and a higher purchase price for the consumers though. So, this may eventually lead yung production volumes and consumer supply to both drop. Kasi nga, mas tataasan ng firms yung price ng goods nila. Tapos, syempre, kapag tumaas yung price, alam naman natin magda-drop ang demand kasi mas gusto natin, mas mababa. So, that is all for my report. I give the floor to the next reporter, which is Krisha May Prudo.
Next is Vilfredo Pareto. Vilfredo Federico Damaso Pareto was an Italian polymath. He was born on July 15, 1848. He made several important contributions to economics, particularly in the study of income distribution and in the analysis of individuals' choices. Kilala si Pareto dahil sa kanyang 80-20 rule, which he developed in 1906 after a mathematical observation of Italy's income distribution. So ano nga ba yung 80-20 rule na kilala rin bilang Pareto Principle? Ito yung sa bawat actions na ginagawa ay may malaking epekto. Kaya dapat pag-isipan ng mabuti yung 20% na action na gagawin kasi sa 20% na yon may 80% na possible outcomes or effect nito. For example, 20% of criminals commit 80% of crimes. 20% of drivers causes 80% of all traffic accidents. And 80% of population originates from 20% of all factories. So, gano'n nga ba kahalaga ang 80-20 rule ni Vilfredo Pareto? Being aware of the Pareto Principle can mainly help us set the right priorities. It can help us to focus on activities that will have the biggest impact in our business and personal lives. Malaking tulong itong Pareto Principle para sa better decision making and more efficient use of time. So, ano nga ba ang Pareto efficiency? It is a situation where no one can be made better off without making someone else worse off. For example, yung modernization ng jeepney. Ang modernization ng jeepney ay para sa environment and para makaiwas na rin sa mga aksidente dulot ng mga lumang jeepney. Ang mag-worse off sa modernization ng jeepney ay yung mga jeepney driver na hindi afford yung bagong jeep na ibinebenta. Sa Pareto improvement naman, parehong makikinabang yung dalawang tao or pareho silang magbe-better off at walang ma-worse off. For example, binentahan ko ng bag si Ate Robby Lou, pero may nakita siyang mas magandang design na bag sa online shop. Nag-decide si Ate Robs na ibigay na lang yung bag kay Kim kasi gusto ni Kim yung design and color ng bag. Kahit na binigay ito ni Ate Robs kay Kim, walang na worse off kasi pareho silang masaya sa mga natanggap nila at nabili nilang bag. Yun lang po and thank you for listening.